The conference room showdown. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hayes Technologies, casting long shadows across the marble lobby. Jasmine Reed adjusted her portfolio for the third time, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 5 minutes, she would present a marketing campaign that completely contradicted the vision of Dominic Hayes, the most intimidating CEO she had ever worked under. For 2 years, Jasmine had watched other employees scramble to please him, bending their ideas to match his expectations. But this time, the data was too clear to ignore. The company's current direction would alienate their core demographic within 6 months. Someone had to say it, and apparently, that someone was her. "You ready for this?" Rachel Torres whispered, her best friend and fellow analyst looking genuinely worried. Hayes tore apart the last person who disagreed with him in a board meeting. "I know," Jasmine replied, smoothing down her navy blazer. "But I'd rather get fired for being right than keep my job by staying silent." The conference room fell silent when Jasmine entered. Dominic Hayes sat at the head of the table, his steel-gray eyes scanning through documents on his tablet. At 34, he had built Hayes Technologies from a small startup into a billion-dollar empire. He wore success like armor, his tailored charcoal suit and perfectly styled dark hair making him look more like a magazine cover than a real person. "Miss Reed," he said without looking up. "You have 15 minutes to convince me why we should abandon 6 months of planning." Jasmine connected her laptop to the projector, her hands steady despite her nerves. "With respect, Mr. Hayes, I'm not here to convince you to abandon anything. I'm here to show you why we need to pivot before we lose everything." For the next 14 minutes, Jasmine presented data that painted a clear picture. Their target demographic had shifted dramatically in the past year. The sleek, minimalist campaign Dominic had approved would resonate with investors but completely miss their actual customers, who wanted authenticity and connection, not corporate polish. When she finished, the room remained silent. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Jasmine braced herself for the verbal dismantling Rachel had warned her about. "You're right," he said finally, and the shock rippled through the room. "Every point you made is correct. The campaign we've been developing would be a disaster." Jasmine blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me, Miss Reed. Your analysis is flawless, your alternative approach is brilliant, and you had the courage to present it knowing I might fire you for contradicting me." He stood, gathering his papers. "Everyone except Miss Reed, you're dismissed." As the room emptied, Jasmine felt her confidence wavering. Was this a trap? Some elaborate way to humiliate her in private? The 90-day challenge. Dominic waited until the door closed before speaking again. "How long have you worked here, Miss Reed?" 2 years, 3 months, she replied, staying near her laptop in case she needed to make a quick exit. "And in all that time, how many conversations have we had that weren't strictly business?" Jasmine thought about it. "None, actually." "Exactly." He moved to the window, hands in his pockets. "Most people in this building see me as a paycheck or an obstacle. You see me as someone who can be wrong. Do you know how rare that is?" "I'm just doing my job," Jasmine said carefully. "No, you're doing more than your job. You're being honest even when it's risky." He turned to face her. "Which is why I'm about to make you an unusual proposition." Jasmine's guard went up immediately. "If this is some kind of inappropriate." "Nothing like that," Dominic interrupted quickly. "I'm asking you to give me 90 days. 90 days for what?" "To prove I'm more than the cold CEO everyone thinks I am. To show you that underneath this reputation, there's an actual person worth knowing." He paused. "I'm asking you to let me take you out, get to know you, and see if we could be something more than boss and employee." Jasmine stared at him, convinced she had misheard. "You're asking me out? In the middle of a workday? After a business meeting?" "I'm asking for a chance," Dominic corrected. 90 days. No pressure about the outcome. If at the end you decide I'm still just your difficult boss, I'll accept that. But I'll also promote you to senior director and increase your salary by 40% for wasting your time. This is insane, Jasmine muttered, though part of her was intrigued. Why me? Why now? Because for 2 years I've watched you come in early and leave late. I've seen you defend junior analysts when they make mistakes. I've noticed that you bring coffee for the cleaning crew and remember everyone's birthdays. You're competent, kind, and completely unbothered by my money or position. He smiled slightly. You're also the only person in this building who's looked me in the eye and told me I'm wrong. Setting the terms. Jasmine's mind raced through 1,000 implications. Office romances were complicated. He was her boss. This could ruin her career. But there was something compelling about his directness, his willingness to be vulnerable in a way she had never seen from him before. If I agree to this, there have to be rules, she said finally. Name them. First, at work, nothing changes. You're still Mr. Hayes, I'm still Miss Reed. No special treatment, no favoritism. I've worked too hard to have people think I slept my way to the top. Agreed, Dominic said immediately. Second, I want this in writing. The promotion and raise if things don't work out. I'm not risking my financial security on a handshake deal. My lawyer will have a contract ready by tomorrow. Third, if at any point I feel uncomfortable or want to stop, we stop. No questions, no consequences for my job. Of course. Jasmine studied him, looking for any sign of manipulation or hidden agenda. But his gray eyes were steady, honest. Why are you really doing this, Mr. Hayes? Call me Dominic, at least when we're alone, he said. And I'm doing this because I'm tired of being lonely at the top. Because I want to know what it's like to have someone see me, really see me, not just my title or my bank account. Because you walked in here ready to risk everything for what you believed was right, and that's the most attractive thing I've ever witnessed. Against her better judgment, Jasmine felt herself warming to the idea. When was the last time a man had been this honest about what he wanted? No games, no pretense, just straightforward interest with clearly defined terms. 90 days, she said, extending her hand. But I'm not easy to impress, Dominic Hayes. He shook her hand, his grip warm and firm. I wouldn't want you to be, Jasmine Reed. The first evening. That evening, Jasmine found herself staring at her closet, trying to figure out what one wore to a date with a billionaire. Dominic had texted her an address and a simple message, casual. Comfortable shoes. Trust me. The address led her to a community garden in Brooklyn, far from the Manhattan penthouses she had expected. Dominic was waiting by the gate, dressed in jeans and a simple gray Henley that made him look younger, more approachable. A garden? Jasmine asked, pleasantly surprised. My grandmother started this place 30 years ago, Dominic explained as they walked along the paths. Before Hayes Technologies, before any of it, this was where I learned about growth, patience, and taking care of something bigger than yourself. They spent the next 2 hours walking through the garden, with Dominic pointing out plants his grandmother had chosen and sharing stories about helping her water them as a child. He talked about the pressure of inheriting his father's company, the isolation that came with success, and the fear that he had become exactly the cold businessman everyone accused him of being. When did you realize you were lonely? Jasmine asked as they sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. When I spent my 34th birthday working until midnight, went home to an empty apartment, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I had a real conversation with someone who wasn't trying to get something from me. He looked at her. What about you? What does Jasmine Reed want that she's not getting? Honestly? I want to feel like my work matters. Like I'm building something meaningful, not just making rich people richer. I want someone who sees my ambition as attractive, not threatening. And I want to stop feeling like I have to choose between career success and personal happiness. What if you didn't have to choose? Dominic asked softly. That would be nice, Jasmine admitted. But in my experience, men say they want a strong woman until they actually meet one. Then they weren't strong enough for you, Dominic said, and the certainty in his voice made her believe he might actually mean it. As he walked her to her car later that night, Jasmine realized something surprising. She hadn't thought about their power dynamic once during the entire evening. He had just been Dominic, sharing pieces of himself, listening with genuine interest to her answers. Maybe this 90-day experiment would be more interesting than she had anticipated. Same time next week? Dominic asked at her car door. Let's make it Tuesday, Jasmine countered. I have that presentation on the new campaign Monday. He smiled. Tuesday it is. And Jasmine? Thank you for giving me a chance. As she drove home, Jasmine caught herself smiling. 90 days suddenly didn't seem like nearly enough time, coffee and consequences. The office felt different on Monday morning. Jasmine arrived at her usual time, coffee in hand, but found herself hyper-aware of every interaction with Dominic. When they passed in the hallway, he gave her the same professional nod he gave everyone else, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made her stomach flutter. You're glowing, Rachel observed during their lunch break. Something happened this weekend. Jasmine debated how much to share. I went on a date. With who? Wait, you never date. You always say you're too busy building your career. Rachel's eyes widened. Oh my God, it's someone from work, isn't it? I can neither confirm nor deny, Jasmine said, taking a bite of her salad. It's Hayes, isn't it? You're dating Dominic Hayes. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. Jasmine, are you insane? He's the CEO. It's complicated, Jasmine admitted. But we have agreements in place to keep everything professional at work. Rachel looked skeptical. Famous last words. You know how fast gossip spreads here. The moment anyone finds out, your credibility is gone. Deep down, Jasmine knew her friend was right. But she also couldn't stop thinking about Dominic's vulnerability at the garden, the way he had shared pieces of himself that clearly cost him something to reveal. Her phone buzzed with a text. There's a food truck festival in Prospect Park tonight. Interested? D. Jasmine smiled despite herself. What time? 6. I'll pick you up from work. Unexpected vulnerability. The food truck festival was crowded with families, couples, and groups of friends enjoying the warm evening. Dominic navigated through the crowd easily, his hand occasionally brushing Jasmine's lower back to guide her through tight spaces. What looks good? He asked, surveying the options. Everything, Jasmine laughed. I'm a sucker for street food. They ended up with Korean tacos, artisan grilled cheese, and mango sticky rice for dessert. Finding a spot on the grass, they settled in to eat and people watch. Tell me something nobody at work knows about you, Jasmine said, biting into her taco. Dominic thought for a moment. I volunteer at a youth center in the Bronx every other Saturday. Have been for 5 years. I teach coding to teenagers who can't afford fancy computer camps. Jasmine stopped mid-bite. Seriously? My PR team doesn't know. If they did, they'd turn it into a photo opportunity, and that would ruin the whole point. These kids need mentors who actually care, not someone showing up for publicity. He paused. What about you? Secret Life of Jasmine Reed? I write poetry, she admitted, feeling her cheeks warm. Terrible, melodramatic poetry that will never see the light of day. I keep notebooks full of it in my apartment. Why terrible? Because I pour all my feelings into it, and feelings are messy and illogical and not at all like the polished professional I pretend to be at work. Dominic smiled. Maybe that's what makes it good. The honesty. They spent the next 2 hours talking about everything and nothing. Dominic told her about his strained relationship with his father, who thought emotion was weakness and love was a distraction from building empires. Jasmine shared stories about growing up with her brother Andre, who had sacrificed his own college fund to help pay for hers. "He sounds like a good man," Dominic said. "The best. He's a social worker now, makes barely anything, but he says he's happy helping people. My parents wanted him to be a lawyer." Jasmine looked at Dominic. "Do your parents approve of what you're doing with the company?" "My father does. My mother wishes I'd slow down, get married, give her grandchildren. She says I work too much because I'm avoiding real life." He lay back on the grass, looking up at the darkening sky. Maybe she's right. Jasmine lay beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "What would real life look like for you?" "Honestly? Something like this. Good food, easy conversation, someone who makes me forget about quarterly earnings and board meetings." He turned his head to look at her. "Someone who challenges me to be better instead of just telling me I'm perfect as is." "You're definitely not perfect," Jasmine teased. "See? That's exactly what I need." The office discovery. By the third week, Jasmine and Dominic had fallen into an easy rhythm. Weeknight dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, weekend adventures to places Dominic had never visited despite living in New York his entire life. A Saturday morning at the farmer's market. A comedy show in Greenwich Village. A cooking class where they both failed spectacularly at making pasta from scratch. At work, they maintained careful distance. But Jasmine noticed things changing. Dominic smiled more in meetings. He asked for people's opinions instead of just dictating decisions. Employees seemed less afraid of him, more willing to share ideas. "Whatever you're doing to Hayes, keep doing it," Trevor Nash, Dominic's business partner, told her one afternoon. "I've known him for 10 years, and I've never seen him this human." The comment pleased Jasmine, but it also worried her. People were noticing. How long before someone connected the dots? Her fears materialized faster than expected. On a Thursday afternoon, she returned from lunch to find Gabrielle Kim, the HR director, waiting at her desk. "Jasmine, we need to talk." "My office, please." The walk to HR felt like a death march. When the door closed behind them, Gabrielle got straight to the point. "Are you in a romantic relationship with Dominic Hayes?" There was no point in lying. "Yes." Gabrielle sighed heavily. "I was afraid of that." "Jasmine, you're putting me in an impossible position. We have strict policies about relationships between supervisors and subordinates." "I know the policies," Jasmine said, her throat tight. "We've been careful to keep everything separate from work." "It doesn't matter how careful you are. The perception exists, and perception can destroy careers. Other analysts are already questioning whether your campaign approval had anything to do with merit or with your relationship with Dominic." Jasmine felt sick. "That campaign was approved before we started dating." "I believe you. But will everyone else?" Gabrielle pulled out a file. "I have 2 options for you. Transfer to a different department where you won't report to Dominic, or we can document this relationship officially, which means every promotion, every raise, every project assignment will be scrutinized by the board." "What happens to Dominic?" "As CEO, he has more latitude. But he's also required to recuse himself from any decisions involving your career trajectory." Jasmine swallowed hard. 2 years of proving herself, of earning respect, potentially undone because people would always wonder if she deserved what she had achieved. "The transfer," she said finally. "What department?" "Product development." "Same level, same salary. You'd report directly to the division head, completely separate from Dominic's chain of command." It wasn't what Jasmine wanted, but it was the only way to protect her professional reputation. "I'll take it." Nina's return. That evening, Jasmine met Dominic at his apartment to tell him about the transfer. He lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, but the space was surprisingly warm and lived in, with bookshelves full of worn paperbacks and photos of his family. "I'm sorry," he said after she explained. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated this." "We both knew the risks," Jasmine replied, curling up beside him on the couch. "At least this way I can keep my career and keep seeing you. Still, you shouldn't have to choose between the two." He kissed her forehead. "I'll make this right somehow." They were interrupted by Dominic's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. It's Trevor." While Dominic talked in the other room, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk about Dominic. Meet me at Café Azure tomorrow at noon. Nina Frost." Jasmine's stomach clenched. She had heard about Nina, Dominic's ex-girlfriend from years ago. Why would she be reaching out now? The next day, Jasmine arrived at the cafe to find a stunning woman with auburn hair and designer clothes waiting at a corner table. Nina Frost looked like she belonged in a fashion magazine, not sitting in a midtown cafe. "Thank you for coming," Nina said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I'm sure you're wondering why I wanted to meet." "The thought crossed my mind," Jasmine replied coolly. "I'll be direct. Dominic and I dated for 3 years. We were serious, talking about marriage, building a future. Then one day he decided it wasn't enough. Said he needed space to focus on the company. Broke my heart without a second thought." Jasmine kept her expression neutral. "I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Because I want you to understand who you're dealing with. Dominic is brilliant at the beginning. Attentive, romantic, makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. But when things get hard, when real life intrudes, he retreats into work. He'll prioritize board meetings over anniversaries, business trips over your birthday. He'll make you feel like you're never quite as important as Hayes Technologies." "That must have been difficult," Jasmine said carefully. "But people change." Nina laughed bitterly. "Do they? Or do they just hide who they really are until it's too late for you to walk away without it hurting?" She leaned forward. "I'm not trying to ruin your relationship. I'm trying to save you from the heartbreak I went through. Dominic doesn't know how to love someone more than he loves success." After Nina left, Jasmine sat in the cafe, turning the conversation over in her mind. Was there truth to Nina's warnings? Had she been blinded by Dominic's charm and missed red flags? Meeting the family. Despite her doubts, Jasmine agreed to meet Dominic's family the following weekend. His parents lived in a beautiful home in Connecticut, far less ostentatious than she had expected for a tech billionaire's family. Caroline Hayes greeted them at the door with a warm hug for her son and a welcoming smile for Jasmine. "We've heard so much about you. Come in, come in." Benjamin Hayes was more reserved, shaking Jasmine's hand with a firm grip. "My son tells me you're the one who convinced him to change the marketing strategy." Bold move. "Someone had to tell him the truth," Jasmine replied, and was rewarded with a rare smile from the elder Hayes. Over dinner, Caroline asked thoughtful questions about Jasmine's background, her family, her goals. Benjamin discussed business with the intensity of someone who had built an empire from nothing. But it was the moments in between that revealed the most. Caroline mentioned how Dominic had been different lately. "He actually called me last week just to talk. No agenda, no crisis. Just wanted to hear my voice. He's been working more reasonable hours," Benjamin added, though he sounded almost suspicious of this development. "Leaving the office before midnight. Unheard of." After dinner, Caroline pulled Jasmine aside while Dominic and his father talked business on the patio. "I want to thank you," the older woman said softly. "For what?" "For giving me my son back. He's been lost for so long, buried under expectations and pressure. But lately, I see glimpses of the boy he used to be. The one who laughed easily and dreamed about more than just profit margins." Caroline's eyes glistened. That's because of you. The words touched something deep in Jasmine's chest, but Nina's warnings echoed in her mind. What if this version of Dominic was temporary? What if the demands of his world eventually swallowed the progress they had made? On the drive back to the city, Dominic reached for her hand. You were amazing today. My father actually smiled. That's practically a standing ovation from him. Your mom is wonderful, Jasmine said. She really loves you. She worries I'm going to end up alone, Dominic admitted. Surrounded by success but empty inside. For a long time, I thought she was being dramatic. But then I met you, and I realized she was right. I was empty. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Jasmine turned to look at him, this complicated man who was simultaneously confident and vulnerable, powerful and lost. Dominic, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did things end with Nina? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. She told you we dated. She came to see me. Said you broke her heart, that you'll always choose work over relationships. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Nina and I wanted different things. She wanted a husband who would be home for dinner every night, someone who would prioritize family gatherings over business opportunities. And I was obsessed with proving myself, with building something that mattered. So she was right, Jasmine said quietly. She was right about who I was then, Dominic corrected. But people do change, Jasmine. You've changed me. Made me realize that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. That working until midnight isn't dedication, it's avoidance. What if the novelty wears off? What if I become another obligation, another thing competing for your attention? Dominic pulled the car over to the side of the road, turning to face her fully. Jasmine Reed, you are not a novelty. You are the first person who has made me want to be better, not just more successful. The first person I think about when I wake up and the last person on my mind before I sleep. If anyone should be worried about novelty wearing off, it's me. What if you realize you don't need the complications that come with dating someone like me? Someone like you? Someone whose life is always under scrutiny. Someone who has ex-girlfriends showing up to plant doubt. Someone whose last name comes with expectations and pressure. Jasmine reached up to touch his face. I'm not dating your last name or your bank account. I'm dating the man who volunteers with kids every other Saturday and failed at making pasta and tells me terrible jokes when he's nervous. I tell excellent jokes, Dominic protested. You really don't, Jasmine laughed. But I like you anyway. He kissed her then, soft and deep, like he was trying to communicate everything he couldn't quite put into words. When they finally pulled apart, something had shifted between them. The 90-day timeline suddenly felt arbitrary and irrelevant. This was no longer an experiment or a challenge. It was real, messy, complicated, and absolutely worth fighting for, the crisis point. 3 weeks later, everything came to a head in the worst possible way. Jasmine was in a product development meeting when her phone started buzzing incessantly. Texts from Rachel, from colleagues, from people she barely knew at the company. Have you seen the article? I'm so sorry this is happening. Call me immediately. Excusing herself, Jasmine stepped into the hallway and opened the link Rachel had sent. Her blood ran cold. The headline read, Tech Billionaire's Office Romance, Career Move or Love Story? Below it was a photo of her and Dominic leaving his apartment building together, her hand in his, both of them laughing at something. The article detailed their relationship, questioned whether her recent transfer was legitimate, and included quotes from anonymous sources suggesting Jasmine had used her relationship to advance her career. Her phone rang. It was Dominic. I'm handling this, he said immediately. My legal team is already drafting cease and desist letters. That photo was taken on private property, which is illegal. It doesn't matter, Jasmine said, her voice hollow. The damage is done. Everyone at this company now thinks I slept my way to success. Jasmine, anyone who knows you knows that's not true. Do they? Because I've been at Hayes Technologies for 2 years, and you've been here for a decade. Who do you think they're going to believe? She heard him take a sharp breath. Come to my office. We'll figure this out together. No. Everyone's watching now. If I go to your office, it just proves their point. Jasmine felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. I need some time, Dominic. To think about what I want to do. Jasmine, don't let them win. Don't let gossip destroy what we have. What we have is costing me everything I worked for, she said softly. I'll call you later. She hung up before he could respond and found herself in the women's restroom, gripping the edge of the sink, trying to breathe through the panic. 2 years of proving herself, of earning respect, potentially destroyed by one photograph and a gossip column. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Nina Frost. I tried to warn you. He destroys everything he touches. Get out while you still can. Andre's wisdom. That evening, Jasmine drove to her brother's apartment in Queens, needing advice from the one person who had always been honest with her. Andre Reed lived simply, his social worker salary not allowing for much luxury, but his one-bedroom apartment was filled with warmth and personality. You look terrible, he said when he opened the door, immediately pulling her into a hug. I feel terrible, Jasmine admitted, following him inside. Over pizza and cheap wine, she told him everything. The 90-day challenge, the transfer, Nina's warnings, and now the article that had made their relationship public in the worst possible way. Andre listened without interruption, which was his way. When she finally finished, he was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Do you love him? He asked finally. The question caught Jasmine off guard. I don't know. Maybe. It's only been 2 months. Time doesn't determine love, Jazz. You can know someone for years and never really see them. Or you can know someone for a few weeks and understand them completely. Andre refilled their wine glasses. So let me ask again. Do you love him? Jasmine thought about Dominic at the community garden, sharing memories of his grandmother. Dominic teaching teenagers to code every other Saturday. Dominic admitting he had been empty inside until he met her. Yes, she whispered. I think I do. Then the real question is, are you willing to fight for it? Because here's the thing about building a life with someone, it's always going to be complicated. There will always be people with opinions, obstacles to overcome, sacrifices to make. The question isn't whether those things exist. It's whether the person is worth navigating them for. But my career will survive, Andre interrupted gently. Jazz, you're brilliant at what you do. Any company would be lucky to have you. But if you walk away from Dominic because of what other people think, you'll regret it forever. How do you know? Because I see the way your face changes when you talk about him. Because in all the years I've known you, you've never let fear stop you from going after what you want. Don't start now. Dominic's grand gesture. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at work to find the entire company gathered in the main conference room. Confused, she followed the crowd, finding a seat near the back. At the front of the room stood Dominic, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Thank you all for coming on short notice, he began. I want to address the article that was published yesterday, and I want to do it publicly so there's no room for misinterpretation or continued gossip. Jasmine's heart started racing. What was he doing? Jasmine Reed and I are in a relationship. We have been for the past 2 months. This relationship began after she impressed me with her professional competence and continued because she impressed me with her character, intelligence, and integrity. He pulled up a slide showing Jasmine's work history, her achievements, her contributions to the company. Miss Reed has been an outstanding employee since the day she started. Every promotion she's received has been based on merit. Every project she's led has exceeded expectations. Her recent transfer to product development was initiated by HR to prevent any potential conflict of interest, not because she couldn't handle her original position. Another slide appeared, this one showing Hayes Technologies' policies on workplace relationships. Our company policy requires disclosure and department separation for relationships between supervisors and subordinates. We have followed both requirements. Miss Reed reports to the Product Development Division head, not to me. I have recused myself from any decisions involving her career advancement. Dominic's eyes found Jasmine in the crowd. I want to be clear about something else. I pursued Miss Reed, not the other way around. I asked for the opportunity to prove I could be more than just her demanding boss. She agreed, with appropriate boundaries and protections in place. If anyone has a problem with our relationship, bring it to me, not to her. The room was dead silent. Trevor Nash stood up. For what it's worth, Hayes has been a better leader these past 2 months than in the previous 10 years I've known him. If his relationship with Miss Reed is responsible for that, I consider it good for the company. Gabrielle Kim stood next. HR has reviewed this situation thoroughly. All proper procedures have been followed. There is no ethical violation here, only 2 professionals who happen to develop personal feelings while maintaining their work standards. One by one, other employees stood. Rachel was among them, as were several senior analysts who had worked with Jasmine over the years. Each one vouched for her work, her character, her contributions that had nothing to do with whom she was dating. Jasmine felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the unexpected support. When the meeting ended, she made her way through the crowd to where Dominic waited. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes, I did. Nina was right about one thing, I used to choose work over everything else. But I'm done making that mistake." He took her hands in his. "Jasmine, you are my priority. Not the company, not my reputation, not what anyone else thinks. You." The proposal. That evening, Dominic took Jasmine back to the community garden where they had their first date. But this time, the space was transformed. String lights hung between the trees, creating a canopy of soft illumination. A small table was set with dinner, simple but elegant. "What is all this?" Jasmine asked, still processing everything that had happened that day. "I know we agreed on 90 days, Dominic said, pulling out her chair. "But I don't need 90 days, Jasmine. I don't even need 90 more minutes. I know what I want." They ate dinner slowly, talking about the day, about the future, about what came next. Dominic told her about the youth center, how one of his students had just gotten accepted to MIT. Jasmine shared her latest poetry, reading from her notebook for the first time in years. When dessert was cleared away, Dominic stood and offered her his hand. "Walk with me?" They strolled through the garden paths, eventually stopping at the spot where his grandmother's memorial bench sat overlooking the small pond. The moon reflected on the water's surface, creating ripples of silver light. "My grandmother used to tell me that love is like a garden," Dominic said softly. "It needs constant care, attention, and patience. You can't force it to grow faster than it's ready, but you also can't neglect it and expect it to thrive." He turned to face her, and Jasmine saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "For years, I neglected that part of my life. Told myself I didn't have time for it, that success was enough. But you've shown me that a life without love, without connection, without someone to share both triumphs and failures with, is just an elaborate form of loneliness." Dominic reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "Jasmine Reed, I know it's only been 2 months. I know people will say it's too soon, that we should wait, that we should be practical. But I've spent my whole life being practical, and it got me nothing but an empty apartment and a reputation for being cold." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took Jasmine's breath away. It wasn't ostentatious or oversized, just a simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond. I don't want to wait 90 days or 90 months. I want to start building a life with you right now. A life where we both have careers we're proud of, where we support each other's dreams, where we face whatever challenges come our way together." His voice cracked slightly. "Jasmine, will you marry me?" Jasmine looked at this man who had started as her intimidating boss and become so much more. The man who had challenged her professionally and supported her personally. The man who had stood up in front of his entire company to defend her honor. The man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "yes, I'll marry you." When Dominic slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, Jasmine felt something settle in her chest. This wasn't about completing a challenge or winning a game. This was about two people who had found each other despite the odds and decided to build something lasting. 6 months later. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the community garden that had become their special place. Jasmine's family filled one side, Dominic's the other, but by the end of the evening, everyone was mingled together, sharing stories and laughter. Rachel stood as Jasmine's maid of honor, with Andre walking her down the aisle. Trevor served as Dominic's best man, joking in his toast about how Jasmine had accomplished what he thought was impossible, making Dominic Hayes into an actual human being. When it was time for their vows, Dominic went first. "Jasmine, you walked into my life during a business meeting and turned everything upside down. You challenged me, pushed me, and refused to let me hide behind my reputation. You saw through the CEO to the man underneath, and you decided he was worth your time. I promise to spend the rest of my life earning that decision. I promise to put you first, to support your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine, and to never let work become more important than the life we're building together." Jasmine took his hands, her own vows ready. "Dominic, when you asked for 90 days, I thought it was the strangest proposition I'd ever heard. But it turned out to be the best challenge I ever accepted. You've shown me that it's possible to have both career success and personal happiness, that I don't have to choose between being respected and being loved. I promise to keep challenging you, keep pushing you to grow, and keep reminding you that the man you are when you're just Dominic is more valuable than any title or achievement." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, applause erupted from their gathered loved ones. Caroline Hayes was crying openly, while Benjamin actually smiled, genuinely pleased to see his son so happy. During the reception, Nina Frost's name came up briefly when Trevor mentioned seeing her at a charity event. "She asked about you too," Trevor told them. "Seemed genuinely surprised that it worked out." "I hope she finds what she's looking for," Jasmine said, and meant it. Nina had been wrong about Dominic, but her warnings had forced them to confront hard truths about what they wanted and what they were willing to fight for. As the evening wound down, Dominic and Jasmine stood together, watching their families interact with a warmth that felt like coming home. "So," Dominic murmured, pulling her close. "Was I worth the 90 days?" Jasmine laughed, looking up at her husband. "You were worth it in 30. The rest was just bonus time. Best challenge you ever accepted?" "Without question." And as they danced under the string lights in the garden where it had all begun, surrounded by the people who loved them and had supported their unconventional love story, both Jasmine and Dominic knew they had found something rare. Not perfection, but partnership. Not a fairy tale, but a real love built on mutual respect, honest communication, and the courage to be vulnerable with someone who saw them completely and loved them anyway. The 90-day challenge had ended months ago. But the life they were building together was just beginning.